After Breakaway in Mortal Kombat 11, this is the second time I've talked about a mechanic in a fighting game rather than a character or a move, but unlike Breakaway, which was just a arguably flawed mechanic that people generally disliked, this is kind of an objectively terrible mechanic that I've never seen a single person unironically defend. Today, we're talking about random tripping in Super Smash Bros. Brawl. Now, just to clarify, there's actually a few kinds of tripping in Brawl, but I'm specifically talking about the kind that is randomly induced when dashing or turning around during a dash. For a start, there are certain moves, like Diddy's Banana, that always cause the opponent to trip. These are generally fine, but they're not what I'm talking about, so we won't worry about that. There are two other instances of random tripping in Brawl. The first is that when an attack does more than 55 units of knockback and doesn't launch the opponent off the ground, there is a 13.5% chance the opponent gets tripped. This actually returned in Smash 4 and Ultimate, although in a late Smash 4 patch the chance was changed to 7%. Certain moves also have a built-in chance to make the opponent trip. As an example, Captain Falcon's weak forward air has a 30% chance to do so. This also returned in Smash 4 and Ultimate, and it stacks with the 13.5% chance that I mentioned earlier, if that's applicable. The move with the lowest chance to do this is Pikachu's Jab at 10%, and the move with the highest chance to do this is a tie between Zero Suit Samus's down-angled forward tilt and the rear hit of Wolf's forward smash. They both have a 60% chance. So let's get back to the problematic kind of tripping. Every time you initiate a dash, there is a 1% chance that you trip and fall. And every time you turn around during a dash, there is a 1.25% chance that you trip and fall, which is basically a big fuck you to dash dancing. On slippery terrain, this chance is increased by 2.5 times, so 2.5% and 3.125% respectively. When you trip, you do have access to defensive options, visually identical to the ones that you have when you get knocked down. However, they're significantly worse. For example, Mario's normal get-up attacks do 6% damage, and they're invincible from frames 1 to 25 and 1 to 26 respectively. However, his get-up attack from a trip only does 5%, has less knockback, and most importantly, is only invincible from frames 1 to 8 rather than having over 20 frames of invincibility. When you roll out of a knockdown, you get a good amount of invincibility. But when you do it out of a trip, you've either got very little invincibility or absolutely none. On top of the fact that your defensive options after tripping are very subpar, you're vulnerable for a pretty good amount of time before you can actually use them. In this situation, I'm going to force Mario to trip by hitting him with Diddy's Banana, and then make him buffer a back roll. That was the earliest possible time I could have rolled back there. Notice I was just sitting there for a pretty significant amount of time. Even if the opponent doesn't punish your trip on reaction, they at the very least get to know what's going on, and they'll probably have time to push some kind of pressure, or at the very least gain stage control. Also, ignoring getting punished on reaction for tripping, there's also the matter of, going for something that you think is going to beat whatever the opponent is going to do, and then just randomly tripping and dying anyways. You just kind of have a 1 in 100 chance of getting fucked over for playing Smash Bros. So yeah, random tripping kind of sucks. It's just randomness for the sake of randomness, and I don't really think it adds anything of value to the game. However, I don't think it's bad because it's random. There are definitely ways of going about adding randomness to a fighting game and having it work, so I guess to give a bit of a comparison as to why tripping doesn't work, I'd like to look at some examples of randomness in a fighting game that I think are done well. First off, we're going to stick with Smash and talk about Mr. Game & Watch's Side B. This is a very, very iconic random move, and it's one of my favourites personally. Mr. Game & Watch's Side B is a very simple move. When he uses it, he just hits the opponent with a hammer, and depending on what number from 1 to 9 he shows when using the hammer, the move can have a number of different effects. If he gets a 1, he only does a single % of damage while taking 12% recoil, and if he gets a 9, he gets an incredibly powerful attack that does 32%. And everything in between is just kind of whatever. I think what makes Mr. Game & Watch's side B work as a random move is that it's not a particularly good move. It's kinda slow, pretty unsafe on shield most of the time. And it's also pretty stubby, especially if you get a 9, which in melee has a smaller hitbox than every other number. Mr. Game & Watch's side B is a really risky move to just try and throw out in neutral. It really doesn't have any use there. If you're going for this move, you're either trying to combo into it, or you have a hard read on what you think the opponent is going to do. Which may or may not pay off, of course. Relying on side B would be pretty annoying, but this is the thing. You never have to rely on it. There's not a single situation where it's your best option, it's just a risk that you can take, hoping for that juicy 9. In pretty much any scenario where you could go for side B, you have a safer, more consistent option available. This is why I think this move works as an example of randomness done right in a fighting game. Yes, going for the 9 is risky, it's a 1 in 7 chance in Melee and Brawl and a 1 in 9 chance in Smash 4 and Ultimate, but it's a risk you are never forced to take. In pretty much every scenario you could go for a 9, it isn't your best option. You have significantly safer options available. By going for it, you are making a calculated risk. You are foregoing your safer options to fish for this chance. It's not bullshit, it's a calculated risk. That obviously may not always pay off. Next up I want to talk about another very iconic move that revolves around RNG or random chance, and that's Faust's item throw. When you input quarter circle forward and punch, Faust throws a random item up in the air and has it fall back down again. In Strive there are 9 different items, and while which one you throw is random, the way they act is consistent. Some of them, such as the Meteor, are potentially incredibly powerful. While some items, like the Bomb and Trumpet, are potentially detrimental for Faust, because the opponent can make use of them too. Honestly, the main reason I consider item throw such a good example of RNG in a fighting game is because of the throw itself. If Faust randomly threw one of 9 items just straight at you, that would be complete bullshit. There'd be no, sense to it. You'd just randomly throw bullshit and hope for the best. However, because of the way it arcs off screen and is active on the way down, both players have plenty of time to react to what the item is, and then they have time to process how they're gonna deal with it. Of course, the situation is usually in Faust's favor, but it should be. He's the one who fucking threw it. Faust's item throw works because both players have ample time to react to and process the random element of the move, and everything after that is consistent. Of course, this goes out the window somewhat with his item supers that throw multiple items. It's a lot harder to tell what's going on. But those cost meter, so he deserves it. He's allowed a little shenanigans. Lastly, I want to talk about Cliff's dodge in plus R. The input is quarter circle back and punch, and it's strike invincible for its entire duration, a maximum of 48 frames. It has 2 follow-ups, a fast meatless chop, which staggers on hit and is minus 11 on block, or a much slower, much more unsafe force break version, which is much harder to land, but is incredibly rewarding on hit because it does an insane amount of stun, more than any other move in the game. This is an amazing defensive tool, but there is a slight catch. There's a random chance that Cliff will throw out his back instead of doing the dodge, and he's completely vulnerable if he does so. However, the chance isn't completely random. It depends on how high his stun is at the time, and using the dodge raises his stun by just over a fifth. If his current stun is less than a quarter of his maximum stun, his dodge will always go through. However, he has a 1 in 8 chance to throw out his back if it's between a quarter and a half, a 1 in 4 chance if it's between a half and 3/4, and a 1 in 2 chance if it's over 3/4. On top of the dodge, Cliff's 5D also increases his own stun. Keeping track of your stun in plus R is difficult because the game never explicitly says how high your stun is. The best indicator you have is that your character's icon will flash red once you're close to being stunned. Now, a key defensive option fucking you over at random might seem kind of weird, but personally I think it kind of works. Cliff as a character is designed around having below average defense. He has arguably the worst dead angle attack in the game. He has below average health, no guts, is tied for the lowest stun in the game, while having moves that increase his own stun. And that's fine. He kind of needs it to balance out his huge normals, high damage, and suffocating Oki. Funnily enough, Cliff's only true invincible reversal is also kind of random. Basically, Cliff's dodge is sort of a last resort. It's not something you want to rely on if you think your stun is high, but the reward is potentially very high. And I like this. I mean, it might be annoying to rely on, but at the end of the day, you're using this if you're on defense, and if you're on defense, that's kind of your fault, technically. To be fair though, this move is not just a defensive tool. The randomness can apply when you're using the move offensively, specifically when you're trying to combo into the force break chop after an FRC. This I'm not sure how I feel about, to be honest. It hasn't happened to me in a real match yet, but I can imagine this being incredibly frustrating. So, in fairness, maybe this isn't the best example of good RNG in a fighting game, but to be completely honest, I'm currently learning plus R with Cliff, and I just wanted an excuse to talk about this guy, because I kind of love him. I really do. And I do genuinely like how this works defensively. So, those are 3 examples of randomness or RNG done well in a fighting game, or I guess if you want to be a nerd about it, 2 examples of it done well, and 1 example that I'm not completely sure on, but I think is cool, so it gets to be in the video anyways. The reason I brought all this up is because I think they're all good for different reasons. One is a random chance that you're not forced to take, but you can go for if you think the risk is worth it. The other is a random chance that both players have ample time to react to and process the results of, and the last is a random chance that's used to balance out something that would otherwise potentially be too strong and alleviate a character's intended weakness. So why did I bring all of this up? Because I want to point out how tripping kind of just fails in all 3 of these categories. Random tripping is definitely a risk you are forced to take. You can't really just not dash. Dash dancing I get, you can choose to just not do that. But dashing as a whole, that's a real big ask. It's just such an integral part of Smash. Like, you can't just walk and jump everywhere. I also think random tripping fails in terms of being something that both players get time to react to and plan around. They really don't, it just sort of happens. Like, yeah, you can react to the opponent tripping and potentially get a punish, but it's not something you're actually, like, planning around before it happens, it just does. Like, the opponent trips and you're like, oh shit, nice, maybe I get a punish. Or you trip and you're like, oh shit, fuck, I hope I don't get punished. You know, there's not really any strategy involved, it just happens. Lastly, random tripping definitely isn't keeping anything that would be potentially overpowered in check. The obvious one is dash dance, but like, it's not like dash dancing would be overpowered without random tripping, right? Like, realistically, it would probably be completely fine. Funnily enough, you could argue that random tripping is doing the opposite of keeping something overpowered in check, because the character who is arguably the best at playing around it is Meta Knight, thanks to his incredible presence in the air. It helps no one, but the best character in the game can kind of play around it to some degree. That really sums up why tripping is such a despised mechanic. It doesn't help anyone, it doesn't really add anything of value to the game. It's just in the game and it's bad. Now, I understand that Brawl was taking the series in a different direction compared to, like, Melee, and that's completely fine. Brawl is a really sick game in its own right, and while Melee's cool, not every game needs to be Melee. Melee exists. If you like it, go play it. I do. But, like, I don't really see what random tripping does. Like, when I was a kid playing this game, I didn't even know random tripping was in the game. Like, I just didn't understand it. So, random tripping hurts people who want to take your game seriously, but it's not like it benefits casual players. In a best case scenario, random tripping is just kind of there. Either you don't really mind it or you don't really notice it because you're just playing for fun, and that's completely fine. In a worst case scenario, you've got people in an actual tournament setting losing key interactions not through any fault of their own, but because a 1 in 100 chance kicked in because they dared to fucking move in a platform fighter. Random tripping like this is just so strange. It's such a small thing on paper, but man, it's had such an impact. Even if you don't mind it that much, I think we can all agree it's a damn good thing it never came back. So yeah, that's everything I have to say about random tripping in Super Smash Bros. Brawl. I hope you don't mind me talking about a mechanic in a fighting game again. I just really liked the Breakaway vid, it holds up as one of my personal favourites, but honestly this is a bit trickier to talk about, because while it's generally despised and had a massive impact, it's a very simple mechanic. Also, I hope you don't mind me using Cliff as an example of randomness done well. It's honestly kind of debatable, and I've heard some mixed opinions, but I just really wanted to bring up Cliff, because I think he's great. Also, even if you don't think it's a good example of RNG done well, I think we can all agree it's better than fucking random tripping.